Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining with me in our morning devotionals. That's what we've simply called them since we first started broadcasting them back in 2022 or 2020 in the beginning of the COVID shutdown, lockdown epidemics. That's really kind of what gave birth to me taking the time to really talk into people's life on a daily basis. And at the time, I was very concerned that people were going to lose contact with the church, with their faith, with the Word of God. They kind of get caught up in the lockdown. And so I just committed to be able to do this until that emergency was over. And well, it wasn't that much longer that we actually went back to holding live services, but so many of you benefited from these daily conversations that I just continued to do them. And it's been a blessing for me, and I'm thankful that it's been a blessing for many of you. I wanted to address a couple of questions that I've gotten most recently. Some of you have encountered, as you're watching the devotionals, these commercial breaks, and people are wondering, have I begun to market these daily devotionals or something of that nature? And a matter of fact, I was unaware that it was even happening. It's something that takes place, especially with YouTube, that they have this kind of contractual agreement with those of us who broadcast over their system, that when they reach a certain level of viewership, they can go ahead and begin to post commercials. We don't have any choice what they put there or when they put them. They just start showing up. And as I said, I really don't know that they're there until someone who is watching reports it to me. So no, I'm not making any money off of it. And the YouTube is, but I'm not. And they're not intended to be commercials. So anyway, that's just something that we have to deal with. We have no way around that. The other thing I want to mention is that we're going to be releasing, in fact, it's going to come on October 1st, Wednesday, October 1st, we'll start the first in a series of weekly broadcasts, which is called What the World's Coming To. And if you're interested in that, you can subscribe to that, because basically you have to sign up for it if you want to have it sent to you. We're not going to simply force it on you, but it's really found at www.wtwcomingto.com. And of course, you see that's abbreviation for What the World's Coming To. I'll say that again, www.wtwcomingto, that's COMINGTO.com. And if you want to go there, you can get the updates and resources, and also you can stay current with us as you have the opportunity, and it's convenient. You can follow along as we deal with events that are transpiring in the world that seem to parallel what we find in the Bible with regards to the end times, the things that Jesus said we need to watch and be ready for. But having given that little bit of information, I want to move on to continuing our conversation about the book of Proverbs. We're in chapter 11. I wanted to pick up our reading today in verse 15, where the text reads as follows. It says, "Whoever puts their security in a stranger will surely suffer, but whoever refuses to shake hands in pledge is safe." Now, the question is are we in a place where we should never sign a contract, or we should never be in any kind of agreement with another person? That's not what he's talking about. In fact, what he's saying is when you're being a security for a stranger, he says basically you're committing yourself, you're really swearing to do something with someone whom you don't really know. You're not familiar with it. So the difference is if you co-signed a loan for your kids to go to college or to buy a car or something of that nature, they're your family, you know them, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, unless, of course, they have proven to be an unreliable person in the past. But the idea is that you're talking about someone whom you have no relationship with. You don't really know their history. And the problem is that sometimes we meet people who are very charming and very enchanting and seem very friendly, and we assume that we know them when we don't know them. And that's why we often do background checks. We basically look into this person's personal history. That's why we look for references, because sometimes we can find ourselves entangled with something, with a person who is unreliable. And so it first and foremost, I think, speaks to the dynamic of somebody who's becoming a co-signer. They're agreeing to share the burden and the responsibility. Secondly, he says, whoever refuses to shake hands in pledge is safe. Again, this is even a little bit deeper idea, the idea that you're entering or engaging in a partnership with that person. And again, you carry equal responsibility for everything that's incurred, whether it's the debts or the performance obligations or those things of a nature. And so one of the principles we understand in scriptures is that it says we're not to be in fellowship with darkness. In other words, I think it's always dangerous to go into a business partner relationship with somebody who is not a believer and therefore is not governed by the same kind of ethics and values that you have. And it certainly applies to the most important partnership, which essentially that's the idea of being in a marriage relationship with someone who doesn't have the same value. In fact, Paul makes that statement in 1 Corinthians 7 that people who are widowed and want to remarry, he says they can remarry, but has to be in the faith. And so it's really important that we be in relationship, in a spiritual relationship with someone before we become engaged in an economic or even a physical relationship with that person in the context of marriage. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a Christian music artist that I knew and we had worked with for quite a while. And I asked him the question why he was signed on a secular label and not a Christian label. And his answer really shocked me, but I thought was really insightful. He said, because I find the secularists don't lie to me. In other words, the non-Christian knew that he was bound by the contract, and if he didn't keep it, he would get sued. But many times Christians will enter into a contract with a Christian recording company, and they find out that the recording company is counting on them, not suing them, because they're brothers in the faith. And so he said, I found that many times the non-Christians had higher ethics and commitments because there was more consequence to their bad behavior than the Christians who felt like they could get away with something that wasn't right. So anyway, there's my thoughts on that, and I hope that helps to put another brick in the wall of your life, to the house of your soul, so that you can stand against the winds and storms of circumstances that affect all of us because we live in this kind of a world. God bless you. Go in His grace.